Well, good morning. As you can see, it's a bit of a grey day here up on the southeastern edge of Dartmoor on the morning of Wednesday, 29th of May 2019. And a few minutes late getting together this morning, not least because it seems that Facebook are getting ever more creative in preventing independents from actually broadcasting on their platform. So although I'm not technically banned from Facebook, it would seem that for whatever reason, the camera is no longer able to connect to Facebook to broadcast live. So I'm restricted to YouTube, and then we'll have to share it around from there. Anyway, here we are, just a few days after the announcement of the European election results. And, the only surprise for me is that people are surprised. Now, I guess I have the luxury because I spend time in the southwest of England, in the southeast of England, and in the north of England. I get to speak to a very broad range of people. And so for me, it was an absolute no-brainer that the Tories and the Labour Party were going to get absolutely spanked. And that is, of course, exactly what occurred. And gasp of surprise, the only area of England that didn't vote for the Brexit Party, or the Brexit Party didn't get enough votes to win effectively outright, was London. And what a surprise, because all those metros who basically have their snouts in the trough and cream it from the EU. But elsewhere in the country, if those metros ever bothered to get outside the M25, they would know that 40 plus years in the EU has changed the whole landscape of the country, particularly economically, because no longer can a single wage earner provide for a family. And of course, this is absolutely by design. And, it's not just in the UK, but, it is very pronounced. And the great tragedy is, of course, that the vast majority of people under the age of 50 have no recollection of life before the EU. And whilst I'm not going to pretend that, it was any kind of real utopia, but nonetheless, there was a lot less pressure. A guy could hold a job and pretty much know that that job was his, provided he did what was required. And on a basic 40-hour week, he could provide for the family. And, I must confess that, when my ex-wife, when we had our first child in 1979, it never entered my head that she would need to work while the children were actually, growing up. And that was the case really right through until they left home. So, this is the change in attitudes. And I know that there are those who say, well, that's just extremely sexist of you. Well, I don't think so. If my wife had decided she wanted to work, then she could have done. But she absolutely embraced the responsibility of motherhood and raising the family. And of course, that is something that the state is trying to destroy. And in fact, I read an article just a few days ago that said that basically parents are really no longer relevant, and the responsibility for raising a child, for establishing a child's worldview, should be the state. Well, God help us. But anyway, the good news is that, of course, what the EU referendum and the recent election results demonstrated was that there are sufficient people around the country still capable of independent thought, still capable of doing a broad analysis and recognizing that continued membership of the EU is not in the best interests of the people in this country. But of course, the Ramonas are not going to let it go there, so they're going to keep the division going instead of accepting gracefully that basically they got hammered, they got nailed. Over a third of the people voted for parties that had Brexit at the absolute heart of their manifesto. And of course, that's the Brexit Party and UKIP. And no real surprise that, UKIP bombed out gaining just 3.6% of the vote, because UKIP went toxic the moment that it aligned itself with Tommy Robinson. Now, whatever you think of Tommy Robinson, the reality is that the media had certainly done a number on him, and he was toxic. So consequently, from that point forward, UKIP were effectively unelectable. But, Brexit, Farage stepped into the vacuum, and a party that was just 6 weeks old getting 31.7% of the vote. I mean, this is a truly remarkable, well, it would be remarkable if it wasn't so apparent to anyone capable of independent thought that that was always going to be the case. And so once again, whatever you think of Nigel Farage, the reality is that the country have got behind the Brexit party. And of course, the MPs who left their respective parties to form Change. Whatever they call themselves, well, they just bombed out. And once again, it just shows their total lack of grip on reality for ever thinking that they could establish a Blairite middle stream party. Well, Labour and the Tories, between the two of them, they got 19.8%. So 19.8% of the vote from the two parties who have dominated Lamestream politics for the last century or so. Well, they may well still get that opportunity to dominate domestic politics, because there isn't likely to be a general election for until 2022, thanks to the Fixed Term Parliament Act. Of course, we did have an opportunity, and Theresa May went to the country, and that didn't turn out too well for her. But if Boris or whomever goes to the country now, they know fine well that the likelihood is that the Brexit party would storm it. And quite possibly, based on the British electoral system of first past the post, quite possibly have such an enormous majority. And that would be entirely on the basis that the majority of the country want out of the EU. And it's no good the Remoaners saying, well, if you add up all the other votes, then, basically it shows that the Remain philosophy actually won the day. This is not correct. And in fact, the deceit and obfuscation here is primarily down to Labour, because Labour has had an underlying policy of anti-EU, get out of the EU, for best part of a generation, epitomised, of course, by Tony Benn. And Jeremy Corbyn absolutely embraced the Tony Benn philosophy of let's get the hell out of this corrupt totalitarian regime. Well, then, of course, what's happened over the last 18 months or so? Jeremy Corbyn has been totally hamstrung. And I mean, this is indicative of the fact that, he ultimately does not have the cojones to stand up to the pressure from the disruptors within inside his party. So first of all, he succumbs to the BS of the fake anti-Semitism claims. And of course, this isn't unique to Jeremy. This has been a strategy right across the world to demonize any politician who might call into question the legitimacy of the Israeli government and its regime of hegemony and genocide of the Palestinian population. So that's point one. And then point two, he succumbs to the pressure to call for a second referendum. Jeremy, if you got out more and you spoke to people around the country, other than those inside the M25, you would know that the vast majority of Labour supporters want out of the EU. So, Theresa May, you have done an absolutely brilliant job of destroying the Tory party, and Jeremy Corbyn, you're not far behind in destroying the Labour Party. The Lib Dems, of course, will just swing whichever way it goes. I mean, they're just so desperate to get into power that once again that they'd sign up with anyone and modify their policies. In fact, I'm staggered that anyone would really vote for the Lib Dems, but there you go, you know, protest vote and all that. And as for the Greens, well, you know, 11%, there's always going to be that fringe. The irony is that most of us would actually embrace many of the Green Party's policies, you know, particularly in terms of pollution. But of course, you know, the Green Party agenda is far more toxic. And, you know, this is no more apparent than their attitude, and Caroline Lucas's attitude in particular, to the rollout of 5G, to their total ignorance on the subject of geoengineering, and basically, you know, so desperate that you know, they won't take a step off of the mainstream plantation. So, all to play for still. And you know, it looks like obviously, you know, the Tory and Labour parties are going to have a serious rethink about how they behave in Parliament, because the will of the people has returned a massive vote for Brexit. So it should be the end of, but it isn't. It isn't, of course. And of course, this is all part of the grand design to disrupt politics. But as I've said so many times, this creates an enormous opportunity to bring about change through the law of unintended consequences. So it's a case of stay flexible and just see what transpires, because it isn't going to go their way. So what do we got to look forward to? Well, through the summer, whilst the British political arena is in disarray, it's imperative, absolutely imperative, that all sentient beings focus on 5G, because 5G is quite possibly the most significant existential threat that not just human, but all life on this planet has faced, maybe since the flood. So, whilst obviously, once again, the lamestream parties just don't want to go there, the reality is that this has to be at the forefront of everyone's discussion. And the focus needs to be on community activism and communities holding their elected representatives feet to the fire. So start with your local council, moving to, which is maybe your parish council, then to your district council, then to your county council, and build up this groundswell from the grassroots. No coordination, no NGO, mirroring precisely what has been the success of the anti-fracking campaign, which is motivating communities to recognise that unless they pick up the gauntlet, unless they get involved, then these abominations of fracking and now 5G will be rolled out in their communities. And of course, 5G isn't selective. It's going to be rolled out across the whole of the country. And yesterday, my attention was drawn to an article that was actually run in the Daily Mail about a month ago now. And this was regarding the cancer clusters that had manifested in the city of Ripon in the US. And the hypothesis is that you know, these cancer clusters were attributed to the erection of a phone mast adjacent to the school. And, you know, whilst, of course, nobody wants to conduct an investigation, just like nobody wanted to conduct an investigation into the water contamination in Camelford in '98, nobody wanted to conduct an investigation into the suicides in Bridgend in 2007 and 2008. Because the establishment works on the basis that if it doesn't do an investigation, then there's nothing to report, nothing to see here, keep moving along. Well, unless we, the collective we, pick up this challenge to shut down this rollout of 5G, then unfortunately the world as we know it will be a very, very different place. And all this on top of the coming grand solar minimum, which is the real climate change, nothing at all to do with activities of humanity, although of course I readily acknowledge that we do have a pollution issue. But the grand solar minimum is going to impact on climate and on our ability to produce crops far more than the establishment are sharing right now, because they don't want you to know. Whilst they make their preparations, they want to keep you distracted, whilst they know that within the next decade, what we are facing on a global basis could be absolutely seminal. This could well be the 21st century days of Atlantis. Well, if you want to get some heads up, then check out David Dubine's outstanding presentation at AV10, where he looked at the coming ice age and presenting the science behind that hypothesis. No palliatives, no trotting out of tired narrative. Independent analysis, which is now shared by an increasing number of independent scientists, those who are not on the payroll and getting paid to trot out the lamestream BS of anthropogenic climate change. So that's available on the Ian R. Crane and Alternative View websites. And we're in the last 3 days, by the way, of the early bird tickets being available for AV11, and what can I say? It's just truly remarkable. There are now less than 30 residential tickets available for AV11, in which will be conducted or held at the Horwood House in May of 2020. And I think we're just about out of battery here, or either that or the moisture's got into my phone. So I'm going to sign off, and I will see you back on Friday morning at 8:30. You take care now.